Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we will continue our lecture series for the course research methodology. Uh, and today we will discuss about the qualitative methods which are being used in research. So the qualitative approaches means that any research that doesn't involve numerical data. As we have discussed earlier on, that we have to see the our research study and the topic itself, and we have to decide whether we opt for pure quantitative approaches or we have to deal with pure numerical data, and where we have to apply the quantitative methods, or you look for the qualitative study. So if you think that the qualitative methods have to be applied, so you have to understand that the in the qualitative based approaches, mainly we are not concerned with the numerical data or the quantitative data. Instead, we use words, pictures, photos, videos, and audio recordings. Other than that, we can also use field notes and generalities. And we want to discover the opinion of particular subjects. And for that purpose, we have to reach out to the people and to find out what they think about that particular concept. And in that scenario, we have to analyze that how various observations we have and how we can compare those various observations or the viewpoints of various people or a group of people. So tend to start with a broad question rather than a specific hypothesis. So instead of writing a very specific hypothesis that you want to prove this phenomena, you come out with a broad question. You might be interested to know how people feel about a certain phenomena or how people react to various situations. For instance, in this COVID-19 situations, let's suppose you want to see that how the healthcare workers have worked in difficult times in the hospitals, how what is the impact on them in terms of mental impact or physical impact, how they feel about it, because they have gone through with the trauma, they have gone through with the situation where there were so many casualties and there is a fear among people. So let's suppose we want to know exactly what type of fear they have or what they feel about that particular situation. So we always go for the broad question and see that how people react to this. For instance, we might see or we might be interested to know that how, let's suppose, the online teaching has affected or the viewpoints of teachers who have been involved in this online teaching, especially in the COVID-19 situation. So how they feel about this whole process, the teaching methodology, and whatever the outcomes they have. So how they analyze themselves, or what are their specific viewpoints with respect to your broad question. So in while we are using the qualitative approaches, we have to develop the theory rather than start with one that is inductive rather than deductive. So we have to come out with a certain theory, and we try to develop that theory with respect to the various opinions, viewpoints, and the feelings of various people in that particular domain or the subjects which you choose, and to see that how they react to the various situations and how they think that these situations might affect them. So, gathering qualitative data. Uh, so, tends to yield rich data to explore how and why things happen. So instead of the specific data in terms of attributes, we are more interested to look for the rich data, because we need to explore how and why that things happened. So we need to know exactly that how that particular event has happened, how it has affected those people, and what are the reasons behind it. So one difference between the qualitative and the quantitative approach is that while we are opting for the qualitative data, normally we do not go for a large sample sizes. In quantitative methods, we have to have a sufficient data to prove our concept, or to prove whatever the hypothesis which we have built. But here, instead of going for the large data sets, we go for a small sample size compared to the quantitative methods. So there are few issues which might arise, such as number one, the respondents providing inaccurate or false information, or saying what they think the researcher wants to hear. So that these are the important things which we have to consider while we are having a sample in our qualitative research studies. We have to identify carefully who will be the respondents. So there we cannot just go with a random phenomena, and we pick lot of samples and then try to develop the quantitative analysis, and then we can say that these respondents are saying this thing. Or for example, we can prove it with the help of regression or correlation and other quantitative techniques. Here we have to choose for those respondents. For example, if you look for a particular domain, then you have to look for those people who can respond you in a best possible way. Most of the time, you also look for descriptive responses, or you need some descriptions as well. And obviously you will also engage those respondents with structured or unstructured interviews to have that information. Sometimes you have to have recordings of those replies with various respondents. So we do not have to be biased while we are going towards a qualitative study. So because uh, there is a possibility that we look for those respondents who respond in the same manner as you want to. This is not a good idea. You have to be very unbiased while you pick those respondents. For example, that you want to study the impact of online learning in higher education institutions, and you want to see that how the higher management of the universities look into this matter and how they feel about it. So you have to opt for those respondents who can give their point of views, of their subjective point of view, uh, which be unbiased, and obviously they have that sufficient knowledge to respond to your questions. Or for instance, you want to see that or study how that COVID-19 situation has an impact on the healthcare providers or the healthcare professionals in terms of their strength mentally and physically. So there you have to look for those subjects, obviously, who have worked in that particular situations in various hospitals or healthcare institutions, and to see that how they respond to your various questions. Number two, ethical issues, which may be more problematic as the researcher is usually closer to the participants. So that is another important thing which you have to consider, that while we are conducting those interviews or while we are collecting the point of views of various subjects, doing the qualitative study, so there are some ethical issues as well, that how what type of relationship you have with the respondent, and whether they are willing to give you such information, because in some studies the subjects or the respondents are reluctant to give you the inside information or their personal feeling, or how. So it means that you have to have the ethical guidelines with yourself, that how you will record all that information of various respondents. Uh, Researcher objectivity may be more difficult to achieve, and of course, it is more difficult compared to the quantitative approaches, where we have a specific data which we know exactly, and we have the set of attributes, and we'll try to have those set of attributes, and then we can work upon it. So here, of course, when we talk about the gathering of the qualitative data, there obviously it is difficult when we compare to the quantitative methods. So we can say that the qualitative research leans towards, number one, socially constructed nature of reality. So obviously, that when I say it is socially constructed nature of reality, we have to understand this aspect, because we are all connected, we are all socially connected, and you cannot just take one event out of any particular situation that has an impact, and you have to understand that various social relationships and the nature of that reality, that how people feel about it. People have various point of views, even in this COVID-19 situation. When we talk about the vaccination process, there is various thought process, or there are various point of views among the stakeholders, even those stakeholders from the medical domain or from non-medical domain, because there are various point of views. So we have to see that how those relationships can be identified, and obviously the social experience, how the social experience is created and give meaning. So whatever you have these responses, or whatever the social experience which is being created, and how it can be given a special meaning or semantics, or the representation. So that is very important, that how we can present it, how we can analyze it, how we can compare it, and how we can give it a meaning, so that we can explain that particular phenomena. The intimate relationship between the researcher and what is studied, the intimate relationship between the researcher and what is studied, and the situational constraint that shape that inquiry, that is also very important. That what is the relationship means, how that researcher is actually related with whatever the study he or she is conducted, and what are those situational constraints. Obviously, whenever we go for such studies, we have various constraints. And when we talk about situational constraints, it means that in the given circumstances, what information is available, how many people are willing to participate in that particular research, how the people will feel about uh, that particular study, and what is the comprehension of that researcher itself with that topic. So you have to have a very good understanding of your topic while you going for the qualitative research study, and you have to see or you have to manage all those situational constraints, because ultimately those situational constraints do matter, and it will decide that how you will go about your study and how you will achieve your goal, or how you will conclude your study based on the data you have. So, what are the important characteristics of qualitative research method? So, as we have discussed earlier on, the first point, it is non-numerical in that it does not involve number or quantity. One of the major characteristic which we have discussed earlier on, that here basically we are not interested in the numerical data. Here we are not interested to say that that, for example, how much percentage did this, how many percentage did this. So we are not interested in that. We are not interested to find out the exact values to represent in numbers, or to represent in terms of probability. Instead, it is descriptive. So it is more dependent on the representations in terms of words, in terms of reasoning, uh, how you develop rationale, how you analyze the various point of views, how you compare the feelings of various people, uh, and obviously for that purpose you need to explain it in writing. That is why it is more descriptive rather than uh, means represented in form of numbers. So we need to have a good skill that how we can shape it. And of course reasoning is one of the very important phenomena. While we are conducting research, we know exactly how we can go with our reasoning process, how you compare various things, how you can conclude some argument. So there are various reasoning approaches in logic, how you can apply that logic into it, and to come out with a strong reasoning to formulate your own point of view. So it is aimed at getting the meaning, feeling, and description of a situation. So, one of the other characteristic of this qualitative research is to find out the exact meaning, to determine the semantics. So, how you can represent that meaning, and of course, the feeling, how people feel about a particular situation. For instance, let's talk about a transportation problem in urban areas. So how people feel about it, how what is their feeling living in specific areas and having those situational constraints, how they feel about it. Let's talk about the health system, how people feel about that health system. So we have to pick and choose people and to see that how they represent their feelings given the situational constraints. And of course, to describe that particular situation. So obviously, whenever we study, we have to have a particular scope. We have to have our limitations. So we have to deal with certain situations and to see that how people respond in various situations. Qualitative data cannot be graphed. Uh, That is why it is not graphed, because here we do not make comparison between variables. There is no concept of variables like dependent variables or independent variables, or we are not interested to make bar charts or graphs to see that how people have responded. Instead of that, it is exploratory. So we explore. And how we explore? Obviously we explore by interacting with various domain experts, with various people who are involved in that particular domain, or they have a direct relationship to it. So we have to explore, we have to find out exactly that what. So here it is not that important that how many point of views are differ from the point of views of others. In qualitative studies, sometimes you might have few responses which differ, but those few responses might be more important or more specific in terms of your study. So you have to consider them. So we have to consider every point of view we have during the study. So it is very important to understand the collection of that data from various resources and given it a specific meaning and to describe all that information. So it focusing on investigating the why and how of decision making. So mainly here we focus on what, to investigate that why and how of decision making, why this has happened, why people have people have not accepted the idea, why there is confusion among people, okay, and why people have not adapted it. So we have to look for these situations and try to find out. For instance, we want to study let's suppose the cloud technologies, the impact of cloud technologies in small and medium industries, that whether they have exploited that technology or not. And here, let's suppose if I go for the qualitative study, so there I will try to find out what are the reasons why the organizations have adapted the cloud technology and how they feel about it, what is their own feeling about it, whether they think they are more secure, whether they think that they have more reliable systems, or they do not have any fear that the information is being shared with others. So there we have to have a qualitative study. So there are so many areas where we might look for the qualitative study to find out the specific point of view, or we have to explore and to dig out that how people feel about that particular question and how they respond to that questions given the circumstances. So while we go for the collecting the qualitative data, uh, so we have to have many methods by which we can collect that information. The first method which normally people opt for is interviews. So we have to interact with the people. We have to interact with those individuals who we think are very important in terms of our study, and we want to have a detailed interview with them to find out how they respond to this particular question. Uh, let's assume that we have a study that the what is the impact of online teaching, how the teaching community in higher education institutions feel about teaching online in that especially in that COVID-19 situation. So here you have to select the population first, and then you look for a good sample so that you can go for the interviews. You might go for interviews with 5 to 10 or to 15 individuals you think are very relevant, and they might give you some good responses, and those, and obviously that is that you have an understanding, or that you feel that that will be unbiased, so that mainly we look for those respondents from various education institutions working in various departments and teaching in various domains, and we try to see how they feel about it. We might pick some of the individuals from the management of those institutions and to see that how they feel about it, because it's totally a different ball game. Right? While we were teaching in traditional classrooms, where we have an eye contact with our students, and we are there to express, we are there to give our point of view, we are there to explain, and we have multiple resources in the classroom to interact with the students. So switching towards online education systems, there were a reluctance among the teachers as well, because they were not trained to such a system or a methodology. So there was a factor of fear as well, because they feel that everything is recorded. So they are more cautious while they are presenting something online. Similarly, there was initially it was very difficult for those teachers to handle the class, because while you are there interacting using any video conferencing tool or online learning tool, so there are lots of disturbances. uh, the disturbances there are intentional and non-intentional as well. And we have to deal with that situation, we have to deliver the content. So there we need to understand and how to talk with the student. So sometimes we have to shift our methodology, we have to slow down, and we have to think about various approaches, that how we can explain the concept to the students. Similarly, the teachers who are going for the online assessments, they feel that it is very difficult to have the online assessments, because it is difficult to have checks on the students. While we are conducting assessments in the classes, there we have a total control, and we can manage the whole class. But here obviously you are sending them the assessment, so you have to change the assessments as well. So there you need to have a good point of view of teachers who have been involved in the online teaching system or a process in the let's suppose in the last 2 or 3 semesters. So we have to see that how their point of view can be captured. So we have to decide, either we go for a structured interview. When I talk about structured interview, it means that you have the specific questions. You exactly know that these questions I have to ask, so you are well prepared before the interview, and exactly you know that these are the questions which I have to put in front of those people. Or you might go for semi-structured. So you have some specific questions with yourself, but you might ask some questions which are connected to the questions as well, and also based on the responses you have. So in while you have those responses, you might further investigate, and you can put some other questions to find out the details. Or even you are going totally unstructured. So you just start talking with the individuals, and you just recording their responses in any of the way. So that is obviously you have to decide while you go for collecting the qualitative data. That is one approach you might have. The second option you have for collecting of the qualitative data is focus groups. That is also very important. That is because while you are involved in a research, sometimes the individual responses from the people are not enough, and our study is based on, let's suppose, the certain questions or specific questions which we have to find out. So we need some sort of discussion which is more focused among people who are involved in it. So we might have some focus groups as well. For example, in the same problem which I have discussed earlier on, you might think that the management itself is a separate entity, although the management is also involved in managing all those online resources and provide assistance and management to all those teaching community. So you might want to study that, or you want to discuss specific things, so you can form out a focus group of those people. Similarly, you can come out with a focus group, let's suppose, with teachers of science, maybe, because the science teachers have labs as well. So there is a lab component, and it is really difficult to go to teach the lab sessions or to conduct lab online. Let's suppose we talk about physics, or we talk about chemistry, or talk about biology. So we might have a focus group of teachers who are teaching these science subjects, and we might have a focus group of 4 to 5 teachers, and we just sit together, and we can discuss on various questions which obviously related to the study, and to see that how that group responds to those questions. So the third option we might have is the questionnaires, to develop a questionnaire or a survey. So normally it is not possible in these sort of studies that we go for too many participants, because if you are going to conduct interviews, whether structured, unstructured, or semi-structured, or you want to have a focus group studies, it is not possible to reach out to more people. So here, if you want to collect some basic information, you can also have a questionnaire, a well structured questionnaire, and there we can collect information by a survey. So let's suppose I have designed also a questionnaire, and we have sent this questionnaire to, let's suppose, 200 participants, or 100 teachers, or 200 teachers, to see that how they respond to various questionnaires given in the questionnaires. So there we see that how they feel about various things. So we might use various options, and we can also use in the questionnaires, normally we go for the Likert scale, and to see that how people respond to various situations, whether they are agree to the statements, or they are totally disagree with these statements, or they stay neutral, or they are strongly agree with that particular situation. So we see that how people give responses uh, based on those questionnaires. So while I am describing these various sources of the qualitative data, keep one thing in mind. It does not mean that you have to go for only one option. Normally, in the qualitative study, normally we have to opt for two or more methods for collecting data. So you have a questionnaire, and you also go for interviews. So that will support your argument. So you have questionnaire which has some generalized questions, and you can go for the wider audience, and you might also have few interviews, and to see that how those responses in the questionnaires, and related with all those point of views of domain experts, or the people who we have interviewed. uh, Secondary data, yes, secondary data can be used as well, which includes the diaries, self-reporting, written accounts of past events. Yes, lots of data which is available. Let's suppose if we want to have various studies based on the qualitative side. So we have to look into the library and to see that what is their personal opinions, and most of the people already publish their public opinions about a certain phenomena. So they have written notes already, which is being published or unpublished or available online. The people have reported these events. The people already have recorded their point of views, and those recorded point of views are also available. Let's suppose they are available on YouTube, and the some people have already published various books. From there you can also extract the secondary data, and there are also reports which are being published over a period of time. So these are all the secondary data. So if you go for the primary data, obviously you have to go for the questionnaire or surveys, interviews, and the focus groups. The next important thing here we might use, that is direct observations. So observation does count while you go for a qualitative study. So you have to have a very good observation, and that direct observations may count. And sometimes those observations may be recorded. For example, you look for how patients have responded to the call of NCOC, let's suppose in Pakistan, for vaccination or for COVID testing. So sometimes you also go in various places and to record, make a video of the various situations, that how people are responding to this event, and to see that their reactions. Sometimes you can also have some audios. You may record some audios to see that how they respond to various situations. So that direct observations also help you to understand how people have been reacted to a particular situation, and obviously connect it with your data or whatever the information which you have also recorded using either the questionnaires, or whether you have that secondary data, or with the interviews. And there is another source that is called ethnography, where you will look for some special study, maybe related to some specific group, based on their ethnicity, and to see that that particular region, how they exactly responded to that particular situation, um, uh, for a specific question which we have research question which we have built upon. So that is a special kind of source which we use in specific studies. And there are various approaches for analyzing the qualitative data. Those are content analysis, the grounded analysis, social network analysis, discourse analysis, narrative analysis, and conversation analysis. So we will discuss all these various analyzing techniques for the quantitative qualitative data in the next part. Thank you.